So new Pokemon games are coming soon, and as always, people have many questions. And I mean more than just regular questions such as, will we finally have a Pokemon design more original than that of Voltorb or Muck? But I often wonder about what we'll get outside of the standard catching, battling, and trading that Pokemon games are, well, so well known for. Pokemon RPGs, after all, are, well, RPGs, and I've sunk hours upon hours upon hours into these types of games. So compared to some other RPGs, particularly those in series such as Persona or Dragon Quest, Pokemon games, if just their standard story modes are accounted for, are rather short. But that's why Game Freak introduced various diversions. So starting in the Generation 2 Pokemon games, particularly Pokemon Crystal version, these diversions went from just being slot machines or a Safari Zone-esque area to battle challenges such as, well, the Battle Tower. So today on Master Trainer, the channel aimed at helping you become a Pokemon Master, we're going over the history of battle towers, frontiers, and other such facilities in the mainline Pokemon games. So the first appearance of a battle facility came with the introduction of the Battle Tower in Pokemon Crystal version. This was located west of Olivine City and set the tone for future battle facilities. Upon registering with an attendant at the front desk and selecting 3 of your Pokemon, you could then engage in 7 consecutive battles, with healing allowed only between battles. Some restrictions also did apply, such as Pokemon not being allowed to hold the same items as one another's, and trainers not being allowed to heal their Pokemon during the battles themselves. Completing a Battle Tower challenge will get you one of 5 varieties of stat boosting drink, and as a bit of a nice note, several of the trainers that can be fought here are based off of members of Game Freak staff. The Battle Tower, however, had a much grander focus in Japan, where players could use the mobile Game Boy adapter to take their game online, or at least online via a cellular phone network, and compete in ranked matches. High-ranking trainers would then be granted the title of Room Leader, among other things, which I've gone over in my video on the mobile Game Boy adapter's features that can be accessed in Pokemon Crystal. The Battle Tower would then return in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire versions. In these games, it was accessible by boat upon beating the Pokemon League. Rule-wise though, it acts exactly like it did in Crystal version, being limited to only single battles, and its only addition being a list of banned Pokemon, all of which were either legendary or mythical, which, to be honest, makes sense. So clearly Game Freak, and clearly others as well, such as those at Genius Sonority, enjoyed this battle concept. So a modified version of this was adapted as a major aspect of Pokemon Colosseum and its sequels, Pokemon XD and Pokemon Battle Revolution. In Colosseums and the Colosseum games, typically players took on 4 trainers, each increasing in difficulty under different conditions. In Colosseum XD during their story mode, these acted as a replacement of sorts for gyms, with Colosseums themselves being known for their association with crime syndicates and massive monetary payouts. Due to the nature of Pokemon Colosseum XD, almost all these Colosseums in these games also involve double battles, which, to be fair, I was a fan of. Perhaps most daunting of these, though, was Mount Battle, which players must take on 100 trainers of scaling difficulty, with special prize Pokemon available as a reward for reaching the top, and breaks only allowed after every 10th battle. It's one of those things I managed to do only once and then vowed to do never again. However, as Battle Revolution on the Wii ditched having a story mode altogether, instead solely consists of Colosseums, each with various gimmicks. For example, there's this one which your party and those of your opponents are placed on a wheel, and you're allowed Pokemon from the set of 12 at random, and I don't know, it's highly annoying to say the least. Controversial opinion, but as much as I love the soundtrack from Battle Revolution, I don't care for the game itself. So moving back into the main handheld games, in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, a variant of the Battle Tower was added in the post-game Sevi Island areas. On 7 Island, trainers can access Trainer Tower, a facility in which players must defeat a number of trainers while literally scaling a tower. What sets this apart from your standard Battle Tower, though, is that there is more battle modes available than just single battles. In addition, emphasis is placed on speed, with a faster time to scale to the top, rewarding the player with better items. This area also adds some Japanese exclusive features, mainly pertaining to the Game Boy Advance's e-reader accessory. Certain Pokemon cards can be scanned here so as to change up trainers and grant new prizes. Then, a variant of the Trainer Tower would also make its way into Pokemon Emerald version known as Trainer Hill. Though accessible midway through the game near Marvel City, this can't actually be challenged until the game itself is beaten. The main change from Fire Red and Leaf Green is that all battles here are double battles. In addition, once again only in Japan, there were exclusive e-reader cards that could be used with this area. Emerald also included battle tents in Slateport City, Verdander Town, and Fall Arbor Town, which players could fight 3 trainers in a row under various battle conditions. These were all to lead up to one of the biggest post-game battle facility additions in the entire Pokemon series. This, of course, is the Battle Frontier. Hyped up to no end in advertising and even having a season of the Pokemon anime based off it, this was set to be the ultimate test for trainers, featuring 7 different facilities, 6 of which were unique to Emerald version and 1 of which was an upgraded battle tower. Accessible at the same point as the individual battle tower was in Ruby and Sapphire, the other 6 facilities included here were the Battle Factory, in which players had to battle using rented Pokemon instead of their own, the Battle Arena, in which Pokemon battle for 3 rounds before being judged in aspects of mind, body, and skill, the Battle Dome, which is a traditional style bracketed tournament featuring 16 trainers, the Battle Pike, in which trainers must explore rooms which may inflict various random effects on them, the Battle Palace, in which Pokemon battle on their own without any input from their trainers, with their battle style actually depending on their nature, and the Battle Pyramid, which is a labyrinth-like dungeon that players must explore without being able to heal up and with a limited number of items. The Battle Frontier also introduced some new aspects to battle facilities. One of these were Frontier Brains, who act as gym leader equivalents and indeed even have their own battle themes, and serve as the head of their respective facilities, but will only battle you during various circumstances. Others are streaks, which depend on how long a player lasts in a facility and comes with both silver and gold tiers, and upon successful long streaks, players will be given frontier symbols, which also come in silver and gold tiers, and which honestly are more for bragging rights than anything else, though at the very least we also had the introduction of battle points, which could be used to buy exclusive rare items only from shops in the Battle Frontier, such as King Rocks and Focus Bands. But still, this place was hard as hell, and that's a shame because I'm not sure of all the potential rewards that you could get here or worth all the time that you could potentially sink into it unless you're an absolutely dedicated trainer. And despite having some of the best music tracks in Pokemon Emerald version, it's certainly not for everyone. The Battle Tower would return in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl version, essentially copied over from Emerald, though now headed by the Tower Tycoon Palmer, and then a new Battle Frontier would appear in Platinum version. This Battle Frontier would only contain 5 facilities, and while still quite difficult, for some reason it always felt much more enjoyable to me than the one in Emerald version. I don't know why, really. The facilities here were the returning Battle Tower and Battle Factory, along with the Battle Castle, in which players fight 7 opponents in a row, and where healing and certain effects can be caused by using castle points, which can be obtained from completing tasks such as winning battles. Then there's the Battle Arcade, in which players have their battles affected by a board that causes random effects at the start of each battle, and trust me, this is actually pretty cool. And the Battle Hall, in which 10 trainers in a row are fought with a single Pokemon, but the order in which they are fought is decided by you choosing what type of Pokemon that you'd like to go up against next. Battle points, or BP, also return, as does the tradition of battle facilities having absolutely amazing music. This Battle Frontier would also make its way into Heart Gold and Soul Silver, residing in the same spot as the original Battle Tower. Weirdly enough, I don't think it's ever explained why the Frontier Brains from Platinum are in Johto, but you know what, I'm not going to question it. Generation 5's main battle facility would be the Battle Subway, which was essentially a train-themed battle tower. However, Black 2 and White 2 would respectively feature the Black Tower and White Tree Hollow, in which players would traverse different areas featuring trainers of various difficulties. At the top would reside the beautifully stylish trainer, Benga, grandson to the former Unova champion, Alder. Black 2 and White 2 would also, however, have my personal favorite battle facility in the entire series, the Pokemon World Tournament, or as it's referred to on the map, the PWT. Located in Driftvale City, this facility featured tiered tournaments against every single gym leader and champion in the series up to this point, complete with remixes of their own respective themes. I mean, was it still incredibly difficult? You bet! And was perhaps filled to the brim with nostalgia pandering? You know what, I think that some could argue that, yes. But did I absolutely adore the PWT? Absolutely, yes. But then I'd say battle facilities actually hit their most disappointing point in Generation 6. Starting with X and Y and then following to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the only real battle facility was the Battle Maison, in which players must traverse areas of a huge mansion fighting trainers of various difficulties, and instead of Frontier Brains, the Battle Maison's boss trainers are the Battle Chantelines, though other characters met throughout the player's journey will also appear here. And that's also especially odd because despite these games hinting at the existence of the Battle Frontier and the Hoenn Battle Maison being in the same place as the Battle Tower was in Ruby and Sapphire, it takes root in Hoenn in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and is essentially unchanged from X and Y. As someone who was happily surprised by the inclusion of a Battle Frontier in Heart Gold and Soul Silver versions, games which were based off of Gold and Silver versions, which didn't even have battle facilities originally, this treatment for the Hoenn games left me feeling just a bit disappointment, even if this area still had great music. This brings us to the Sun and Moon games, which had two varieties of battle facility. The most notable of these was the Battle Tree, which was essentially a more rustic themed battle tower featuring familiar faces from throughout the Pokemon series. It wasn't quite as good as the Pokemon World Tournament, but it was still pretty cool, especially to see Red and Blue once again. However, the Sun and Moon games also featured the Battle Royale, which instead of being Apex Legends but with Pokemon, was actually a 1v1v1v1 match in which one trainer each took an edge of a wrestling ring and had to duke it out for dominance. I wish that instead of ending and tallying up wins and losses as soon as one person lost all three of their Pokemon and thus had to throw the match, that instead continue until only one trainer was left, and I also wish that it didn't cause so much slowdown when played on any console older than the new 3DS XL. But still, it's neat, and it features an incredibly cool Master Royale, who totally isn't Professor Kukui. So this brings us to now. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee versions did not feature any battle facilities. However, I guess the Master Trainer Challenge, which features you going one-on-one with one of potentially every single Pokemon in the Generation 1 Pokedex, without items by the way, behaved kind of like a battle facility, though didn't take place in one, and also totally did not in any way, shape, or form influence the name of this channel. But anyways, it's really not the same without an actual battle facility, well, building, though I guess the Master Trainer Challenge is by far the most difficult of the challenges I've mentioned today. But regardless, battle facilities or their equivalents are fun distractions in the Pokemon games, and I hope we get something similar to a Battle Frontier or Pokemon World Tournament in Generation 8. So with that, what's your favorite battle facility? Do you think they make Pokemon games on the whole better, or worse? Or do you think they're pointless? Let me know in the comments below and maybe drop a like while you're at it. And I'll see you next time.